Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Yerkeblan, and I'm honored to participate in the Central Asian Trade Forum on behalf of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and our program Advice for Small Businesses, which in Kazakhstan is supported by the government of Kazakhstan. We have been partners of the forum since its very beginning, so it's great to see it being organized even through these unprecedented times. I'm joined today by Roni Saab, who is our team coordinator for projects that have to do with logistics, transport, and warehouses. Roni has an extensive experience in the industry. He has worked for several international companies in top management, and he has also an experience in consulting in various sectors from pharmaceuticals to shipping. And Roni, if you don't mind, could you please share 2 or 3 words about yourself with our audience?
Thank you, everyone. So again, my name is Roni Saab. I've been managing a couple of large companies such as the ports in Georgia, Port of Poti, working with Maersk and the APM terminals for over 6 years globally, and lastly, working with free zones, industrial parks, and as my capacity in my own consulting firm, Interports in the UK, as consulting for ports, logistics, warehouses, and logistics industrial parks. On that note, I'm very happy to share with you my thoughts about the situation in the world and in Central Asia in specific, and to talk a little bit more about Kazakhstan and the future trends that we could see coming in.
And today, during this interview, we are going to talk about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on reshaping trade and supply chains in Central Asia and beyond, obviously focusing on Kazakhstan as well. Roni, to start all this discussion, what is the current situation with logistics in the world and how have things changed since the start of the pandemic?
Yes, thank you, Aisha. For that, I'm going to share my screen to explain a little bit more about what's going on today. So basically, from that screen, you can see a lot of words and a lot of catchy colors, but they all run down or boil down to the situation of the coronavirus versus the 2008 economic crisis. In the economic crisis of 2008, global trade lost 5% compared to the estimated 13 to 22% loss with COVID-19. An estimated recovery also between 15 to 48 months compared to the Q4 of 2019. Many publications are already available, as you can see on the slide, from the WTO, Agility and Ally Index, IFI reports, McKinsey reports. The Agility Index, for example, of 2020 shows Kazakhstan efforts on the rail and road and the new dry ports of Kyrgyz, as well as many transport initiatives in the last 3 years. Basically, most of these initiatives were rail, road, and rolling stock. It is also worth mentioning that Kazakhstan has gained 5 points on that index for the last year. Now, moving ahead, also in a global context, we see that the McKinsey report of June 2020 illustrates the sea bulk and air freight splits by industry. It's worth noting here that if we take the automotive transportation, for example, you see that they comprise 5% of the containerized sea cargo, while the agriculture and food products are around 22%, followed by the chemical products of 18%. If we look into the global destruction of COVID-19, we see that 50% of the car business and automotive industry has been hit hard, up to 50%, as mentioned earlier. But that impact on the global supply chain did not have a significant effect due to the fact that automotive is only 5% of the global trade. Unlike FMCG, for example, that was not hit very hard due to consumption, high consumption from people sitting at their houses. So we see that the international trade did not really get hit on all the routes, but rather only on specifics.
And what is the situation like in Kazakhstan?
So moving into the regional situation that actually comprises Kazakhstan as a route, we look at the Asian giants position, China basically. that has strengthened its sea routes in East Mediterranean, such as Piraeus, or West Med, such as Valencia, access to canals to the Black Sea via Istanbul, or the Mediterranean Suez Canal. And of course, finally, at the Northern European Rotterdam, where intermodal capacity allows to reach the Central European markets. However, having strengthened those sea routes, Kazakhstan still holds a very favorable position on the Karek, Traseka, and the $3.4 billion WEWC, the West Europe, West China road route that actually reduces the transshipment or the transit time, basically, sorry, for to 12 to 10 to 12 days. That actually played a very important role during the COVID-19, when most of the ports got delayed, congested, or closed in the beginning of the pandemic. The alternative route via Kazakhstan has been the way to look for. So moving a little bit more into Kazakhstan, we see that the WEWC, for example, the China Kyrgyzstan section via Almaty, has evolved because of the proper infrastructure in Almaty. It evolved from the level of multimodal transport corridor to the level of logistics corridor. We see that there are basically 4 or 5 transport sectors via Kazakhstan. We have the road, the rail, the inland water, the aviation, and the pipeline transport. We see that the road is the largest freight transporter. In statement of the Infrastructure and Development Ministry, they noted that for the last 6 months in 2020, income from the cargo on the road was around 80 billion tenge, which is 7% more than last year. However, the tonnage of this year was around 10% less, comprising of 1.4 billion tons versus the 1.57 or 1.6 billion tons of last year. Yes, there is a reduction in freight cargo by road, but the increased prices of freight have actually rendered profits to that sector versus last year. This is due to many reasons. One of them is taking few cargo from air freight, which is usually higher freight cargo, and because of the lockdowns, there were a natural increase in higher rates. Moving into the rail transport sector of Kazakhstan, we see that for the last 6 months, 196 million tons were transported via rail, which is 2.3% more compared to the same of last year. During the pandemic, cargo transportation was carried out as usual because the rail-related processes are usually carried online. Basically, I think most of the systems that allow the customer to ship via rail are automated, or he can pay online and he can access all the declarations online via KTG. So also it's important to notice that KTG has actually abolished all the fines and charges associated with carriage of goods during that period. The third one is the inland water transport via the rivers of Kazakhstan. The most important ports that I can think of are Pavlodar, Semey, Atirau, and of course the most important seaports on the Caspian Sea of Aktau, Botino, and the port of Kurik. Those are very important ports to look at during the pandemic for today, or during the post COVID-19 expansion of freight expansion, of course, and cargo expansion to support the Karek/Traseka route. If we look into the air freight section, we see that the issues on the rail between China and Europe saw a great boost together with trucking. However, the air freight was not the same. With the shutdown of passenger freight flights, we see that the freight was not anymore supported by the belly of the passenger planes. What happens was that the consolidation had to come in place on bulk planes. This made an issue with not having enough temporary storage models of inventory in airports like Almaty and the region. So on that, the air freight was hit hard, and part of this freight tonnage moved into road and rail. Of course, mainly into road because of the transit time.
You mentioned multimodal briefly before, and how has the pandemic affected multimodal logistics, including regional hubs like dry ports, seaports, etc.?
I think the best way to describe it is using a map from the CAREC, or the Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation, designated rate corridors. If we look into the six CAREC corridors, mainly the Europe, Asia, East Asia corridor, 1A via Dostik, or 1B via Horgos, or the Europe Med East Asia corridor 2, 2C via Dostik, Aktau, and the 2AB from Tashkent and Turkmenbashi, the Europe Med South Asian corridor 6BC via Aktobe, Tashkent, Dushanbe, Kabul, Islamabad, Karachi, and 6D all the way to Gawadar via Ashgabat, we estimate around 10% less volumes on those corridors, but more than 8% revenue increase, especially on consumer goods, as I explained earlier, via Central Asia, of course, from China. This opens options for containerized multimodal operations. While regional hubs are congested, more dry ports are actually needed. Even with having Horgos East-West available in Kazakhstan, the capacities will not be enough to actually attract the full supply chain model. Having multimodal dry ports around the region, such as the terminals in Aktau, Kuriek, are also recommended for empty storage for shipping lines. On the other hand, the insufficient development of river ports could capture benefits had they been there. But since they do not have capacity for intermodal operation, they are not able to attract air freight cargo. Add to the road conditions of the WEWC corridor that could have been in a better state to absorb much better freight cargo amidst COVID-19. Air freight shifted shifted to larger bulk air shipments with not enough transport and warehouses logistics, as I explained earlier in Almaty, for example, or the creation of modern cargo terminals, multimodal cargo terminals next to the airports in the larger cities of Almaty and Nur Sultan, for example. For instance, had those been available, we would see that air freight cargo would pick up much faster than other regions due to the availability of larger airlines or larger air bulk planes that would be accommodated into such warehouses. I can give an example also on the rail regarding the corridors. Nippon Express, a logistics company in Japan, announced its plans to increase its rail services to actually double, connecting China to Europe, beginning of next year. They announced that, I think, the 30th of September, and which is last month, and they were eager to double their air freight with their rail freight, which is already 10% of their current volumes. They have an interest to do that after or post COVID-19 for the medium and long term, in order to make sure that such blockages of congested airports or seaports would not have a large effect on their business, simply because they would have an alternative route via the Karek or the Traseka routes. Another example would be the Danish APM terminals, or Maersk, who have actually started making block trains from China to Europe. I think they received their first block train through Georgia 2 weeks ago. And they are also banking on the blockchain developments to actually increase the efficiency and the digitalization of freight amidst and post COVID-19.
And which of what you mentioned has the most impact on our region and Kazakhstan specifically?
If we look deeper into the trade facilitation issues, I think those trade facilitation initiatives have more impact on the situation in Central Asia. And I can give an example here on trade bureaucracy. Apart from trade facilitation topics that I'm very sure have already been discussed in the CATF this year, I can say that border instability, access to capital, or poor infrastructure, which are basically the expansion of multimodal dry ports, should be the practice to creating a transport and logistics centers inside Kazakhstan as well as outside Kazakhstan. Having enough infrastructure in Kazakhstan will not ensure that the whole Central Asian channels or corridors are adequate. For example, having a transshipment hub in Nur Sultan and Almaty is not going to be enough if there are no logistics centers in Pavlodar, Aktobe, Almaty, Uralsk, Aktau, or Kostanay. To propose a multi-route direction corridor is also important. So once you have a hub in Almaty, if you want to go on the Karek 6 BC or D to Pakistan, the certain connections are not fully available there yet. And I think that we will not be able to realize most of the cargo coming from China via Central Asia by only emphasizing on Kazakhstan. We should develop further satellite multimodal network, as well as more rail and road network to make sure that most of the ports are worked and achieved, such as Karachi, for example, as I said earlier, and the Gwadar port in Pakistan.
Do you see these changes being made in the future?
I can give examples on the trends that have been happening since the epidemic started. Large shipping lines like K-Line have stopped their yearly agreed tariffs or their frame agreements, and they moved into spot rates or spot shipments. We also see that there is a move from contractual to procurement via e-commerce. I can give examples here on Freight Bro from India or Zen Cargo from Germany. There has also been certain platforms supporting spot rates apart from Freight Bro and Zen Cargo that freight forwarders should be looking for in order to maximize their outreach. Other trends have been on digitalization, as we explained earlier. I mean, FedEx and Microsoft, for example, they have created a collaboration to enhance logistics and supply chain management services. They used, I think, Azure cloud platform to do that. While other software such as Forto are used to integrate information from service providers. Other initiatives have been on the process redesign automation. Seva logistics not only are opening in Kazakhstan as a multimodal full service as a multimodal full service provider, but also during the COVID and post-COVID, they have started the single piece picking initiative to lower the touch points, so people touching the cargo or people interacting with each other. While expediters have actually spread their shift policy in the working environment from 1 shift to 2 shifts with longer working hours. We're not going to go into robotics because we love to recruit people, but certain initiatives on robotics to limit the people interaction is also very important. Other initiatives could be we're also on online channels. I can give an example on Inditex, which is basically the distributor or the owner of Zara. They opened a new hub in Holland to support e-commerce channels and to replace their real stores in the cities or in the countries. Mm-hmm. So when the pandemic hit and the shops were closed, they immediately moved into a regional hub in Amsterdam. I think in Amsterdam, in Holland, to actually deliver direct online sales to their clients. Same things happened with Hermes UK, who actually introduced My Places, who used My Places platform to actually sell his online merchandise. What's in it for us? The importance of having smaller warehouses for distribution as distribution centers in capital cities is very important. And the more important is to actually have a last mile carrier to actually deliver those cargo to us. But these smaller warehouses would have to be a supporting channel to a larger warehouses, which are basically the dry ports or the multimodal logistics hubs that we are always preaching for, or stating that they should be available in the larger collection points, such as, for example, Nur Sultan or Almaty, and not only on the borders with other countries, such as the entrance of Dostik or Hormuz. The reason for that is that you cannot have a satellite multimodal logistics hub far from the city. You need to have that energy around this logistics place in order to maximize and make use of most of the cargoes that are coming, especially on 3PL and 4PL services. Similarly, as well to the air freight service business, whereby those hubs would also support the cargo coming on air freight, and which would eventually add value to the multimodal supply chain. And finally, I put here a small example on TradeLens, which is a initiative of Maersk, or that they are using this platform for blockchain services to completely eradicate touch points. This way, from the supplier to the client, there is zero integration between people, while cargo is secure and delivered from A to B. And as I mentioned earlier, for example, Seva Logistics has entered or declared on September that they will be entering the Kazakh market, delivering services regionally to customers in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. From Kazakhstan, this network will expand to make use of the Karek and the Traseka routes, of course, in comparison to the Trans-Siberian route in the north. So the trend, we see the trend that larger multimodal or intermodal providers should be available, and it's only because Kazakhstan, as an example today, is giving them the proper platform to use so that they could come in. Most of these logistic providers or large logistic providers have concerns on transit time, container backlogs, security, safety, mode of life, mode of vie. So these are important for larger companies to step in. I'm very confident that the way Kazakhstan is managing this is going to materialize in more or larger international companies coming in order to facilitate and ensure that this whole trade via all these corridors becomes become actual logistic corridors.
Thank you, Roni. I think no matter what how hard we try, we won't be able to cover every single aspect of how the pandemic affected the world, because the impact is huge. But I'm sure that your presentation has been very helpful for our audience. Is there anything else you want to add, maybe as final words to those who are listening?
For those who are listening, we can only say that, well, take it from a person who actually has worked in Kazakhstan. We still have companies that we support in Kazakhstan, and I can say that the future is there. Not only because Kazakhstan has the location as the main connection between China and Russia, of course, in the first place, and and the whole Central Asia, connecting all the way to Europe. But because with proper legislation and with proper corporate governance, we see that the shift to an established logistics corridor is there. Few investments are still needed on road and rail and optimizing and growing the multimodal or dry port logistics hubs. However, this can be done through PPPs or with the assistance of the private sector. There are opportunities for the private sector to get in there and evolve and get involved as well. But there should be the appetite to do that. And I can only recommend that better to be always a second mover than the last mover. We see that there's no prime mover anymore. Most or some of the international players are there. So better for the rest to actually move in and grab as much as possible the share revenue of the volumes coming in from China. It's worth noting here to close with is that the trade from China via the sea routes from China are around 98% via versus 1% or 1 or 2% only from the road. This gives us a tremendous opportunity to capture cargo coming from the sea freight into the land freight.
Thank you, Roni. And on this optimistic note, I think we will end our presentation. Thank you for everyone who joined our session. And just to give you a heads up, our program Advice for Small Businesses is available to help any aspiring companies in Kazakhstan and in other Central Asian countries. Thank you for being with us.